We keep coming back to synchronicity and to these amazing coincidences. This painting, which is Encounter by Christina Emmanuel, has a whole story. I had invited Christina to be part of the show I curated in Poland. I had met Christina through another exhibition I was involved with called Ceremony of Memory, about Hispanic, Latino, Chicano art that is connected to the shrine or nicho box. And so I met Christina that way. And someone asked me if I was going to do a work for the show in Poland, and I said, no, I'm the curator. But I started thinking about it. And a dark deity we haven't talked about yet is Kali, and I'll tell you about her later. She's been very important too. And I said, oh, I know, if I did a work, I would do Kali meeting Guadalupe, because I really feel these energies need to, they are different parts of ourselves, and in my own experience, they were both very instrumental. So soon after that, I was in San Francisco, and I was telling Christina about this, and she looked at me real excited with eyes like coming out of her sockets. And she said, come to my studio. And she was working on the diptych of Durga and Santa Barbara. Durga is the Hindu goddess from whose brow Kali is supposed to have come out. And Santa Barbara is always represented with a sword. And I mean, this was already an amazing synchronicity. There's no way to it, And the next day, I stayed at Christina's that night, and the next morning she woke up and was very excited. And she said, I saw this image of Kali having tea with Guadalupe. I said, go for it. This is beyond us. We're just the instruments. And so she did the painting, and the painting went to Poland, and I was able to buy it. And I feel, so, I'm just a keeper of this image, but it's just wonderful. And everyone, especially women who come here, see it and say, I want a copy of this, It's really quite wonderful. So it's another story, of this magical web. But I must tell you about Kali. Kali came in my life in '88, and I was looking for a book actually on symbols. I was at the bookstore downtown, and this other book kind of fell off the shelf, and I went to look at what it was, and it was this book, Kali, the Feminine Force. And I bought it, of course, and I took it home, sat right in this chair, started to read this book, and understood the image, understood the meaning of the sword. Now, Kali is known by most people, is seen as this devouring, ogre who just is bloodthirsty and is a killer. Well, what the sword represents, and I got that right away as I was looking at these images, is that the sword really helps you cut the thread of bondage, which is one thing, we are in difficult situations and we can't cut them. We're afraid of the change. We're afraid of. In that time, I was in a personal situation that I knew I had to change. I had been separated from my husband for several years. And we are deeply, deeply connected, and we still are very much and will always be. But I knew at that time that I needed to cut that thread because it was a little bit codependent. And it was very hard because he was my dear friend, and even though I was clear that I'm not to be with him anymore, it was really hard. Well, when I saw this image, I understood right away. And I just got the courage to write the letter and send it off, and that was it. And for 3 years we were not in touch. And that's what I needed now. I'm on my way to New York soon, and we'll see each other again for the first time since '88. And it will be like always, because I know the connection, and I know him well enough to know his connection toward me, but I needed that time. And it was really hard to do, but Kali helped me. And you see, as one of the threads in my life has been weaving, and I've been very involved. Before, actually, it's interesting, I connected with the dark Black Madonna and this whole lineage. I was very involved with the symbolism of weaving, which really led me to all the feminine deities and the goddesses who always are shown with a spindle. And I have pictures of the Virgin Mary, beautiful painting where she's shown spinning, and the thread comes out of her belly. And it's a 14th century Flemish painting, I believe, and I've done a lot of research about that. Weaving has been very important, and through Kali I have understood that weavers, they weave, but they need to cut the thread, And I did a performance in '89 at the Banff School of Fine Arts where I was visiting artists, and actually I was supposed to do a lecture on the symbolism of weaving. And after 2 weeks there, in this incredible energy of the Rockies and the creativity of the school, I transformed my lecture into a performance and installation. And I did a ritual, and where I enacted actually a dream that I had many years ago, the dark kind of Kali-like energy, of cutting. So I enacted this dream, and I really understood, and people in the audience with me understood, that weavers need to cut, and that this is something that we don't really think about, but Kali helps us do that. And so for 2 or 3 years, when I was in a transition period and I needed to heal these old wounds, when I'd meditate, sometimes I would feel her energy, and my arms would, I would bring up whatever I needed to deal with, and I remember my arms would kind of become swords, and I would just sort of go like this, and it would help me cut whatever I needed to cut. And then I had a dream of Kali. You see, Kali is she has 10 sort of incarnations, and one of them is Mahakali, I believe. And she's with that, she cuts her own head. And this is, to me, was, symbolically, it's an amazing thing, because this is an energy. Once she's done her work with you, she goes on. She doesn't make you a slave forever. And it felt like she had done her work, and then I was able to move on to another aspect of this deity. And it was quite amazing to have that. It's the only time I ever dreamt of her, and it was sort of toward the end I felt that I was sort of moving on. And it was a very joyous dream too, very joyous. So that's Kali. The spindle is one thread, and again about synchronicity, this call is from it's related to water, which I'm very involved with too. And I think that's one theme that's recurring in, many of these feminine deities are involved, they're connected with water. I mean, Stella Maris, the Virgin in the Catholic tradition is called the Star of the Sea, and many, many of them are connected with water. When I came here in '86, I started a work called The Great Cleansing of the Rio Grande River. See, for me, all of my story, this part of the story is started in '79, where I really started a quest for the spiritual in art in our time. And at the time, I was director of a gallery, and I thought that, and the gallery was involved with weaving and tapestries and so forth. And I thought that once I would find these artists, I would work with them. I didn't know that, I didn't call it even a quest in those days. Now, of course, 14 years later, I see it is a quest. That's all I knew. But what happened is that it was a very deep personal also quest, and a lot of healing, a lot of things happened during those years. And step by step, things started to evolve, and so my revealing myself as an artist is a later development. And one of the first projects that I have done has been this great cleansing of the Rio Grande River. For the last 6 years, every month on the 17th, I go to the river and do a cleansing ritual, which is actually picking up the trash on the physical level, but suddenly for me it's a ritual, therefore it's been sort of a ceremony. And I did that really because I was called to do it, not, for any other reason. When I saw the Rio Grande so trashed, and so I said, another insult to the Earth Mother, and something must be done in an instant. I saw this project, and I started it actually in '87 when I moved here, because I saw it in '86. I mean, I had this vision in '86, and so through that I've been deeply, deeply involved with the water in my work in many, many ways. Water is life, and water definitely. And the thing is, when you deal with a river that's polluted, and then I started my work in the Santa Fe River, walking down toward the Rio Grande, always sending the great river the energy. I didn't have a car until recently, so I couldn't get to the Rio Grande, which is about 14, 15 miles from here. But when you are in a river which has no water, the Santa Fe River often is dry because it's dammed. In you really get in touch with that. That water is life, and how when the water is taken away, the life in its deepest sense, in its sacred way, is taken away. I interviewed, people, I talked to people as I was in the river who have lived along the river, some Hispanic people who live down in the barrio and who've lived there for generations, and a man who remembered in his childhood the flowing river, and the river would freeze and it would be their hockey field and they'd fish, and there were so many trees they couldn't see the other side of the river. I mean, this is a tiny river. And he said, well, as soon as the water was taken away, the life started to change, and you don't have to. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's at the same time it doesn't make sense. But to come back to the Guadalupe, what happened to me as I was doing this ritual every month, I happened to be in the river one day on the Sunday, and I happened to be by the Guadalupe church, and as I was picking a can and another, I saw the parishioners go into the church, and I visualized them doing their rosaries, bead by bead, and then I was aware that I was picking up a can, then another. It was the same gesture, and that's where I really felt that, this kind of action, these are the new ceremonies, these are the new rituals. And when you go with an open heart, I mean, you could pick up trash, but do it, but if you do it really with an open heart and an intention, and listening to nature, to the earth, to the river, these are the new ceremonies. And it was quite for me, actually, I've written a journal. I mean, I started keeping a journal because I had all these experiences in the river that I didn't expect. So, and it has become a book in a way. I haven't published it, but I'm sort of working on it. And the Guadalupe and the Santa Fe River, as I write about it, are my two holy ladies, because of course the river is a feminine. I mean, in English, I love the English language. It's, now more natural practically than French. However, there is no gender, and I naturally call things that are called it here. For me, it's a he or she, and the river always was a she. I mean, as soon as I walked into the river, she was a she. And so I'm in the river, and then there's the Guadalupe. And so these two feminine energies have really often kind of became one. And the extraordinary thing was that one day I was reading actually Ian Begg's book, The Cult of the Black Virgin, and I read that Guadalupe means hidden river. Guadalupe means hidden river. And when I discovered that, I thought, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And then I discovered that this ritual was about, of course, the cleansing of the river and so forth, but it was also about my own birth, about everything. So these two energies keep playing with each other, and sometimes I don't know who I'm speaking about. It's her or she. Is it the river? Is it the Virgin? But I visualize them. There is the crescent holding the Guadalupe. I mean, she's resting on the crescent. That's held up by the angel. And I see the meandering river, intertwined with the crescent. I often see that image. As a matter of fact, the river sent me on different adventures, and one of them was starting a community garden with downtown with some Hispanic people living on the side of the river. He said, "Garbage? You want to see garbage? Come and see." And the lots on the side of their houses were incredibly trashed. So a friend of mine, a couple of friends at the time, had been thinking of doing a garden in their backyard, and they said, "This is much better. Let's do a community garden." So for a few months we left the river a little bit and did this community garden, and these were muralists, and there was a long wall. These two men whose property it was, we had planned to do a mural, and the image that I had was, I had proposed was the Guadalupe, with the traditional image, but with the river intertwined, with the crescent. And my dear friend Margaret Card, who at the time was very involved with my what I'd call in art term my performance, but I always add ritual or pilgrimage, because my work are contemporary forms of that sacred tradition. And Margaret, who's also very involved in the feminine, we talked about snakes, and so often we'd see a snake also kind of like woven in this crescent moon and this river, and and actually I saw, of course, the river being taken away from the water being taken away from the river. I saw very few animals in the years, that I've been there, but the snake was one of the regular visitors of the journey, and so that was present there, so there was a reason for the snake to be there. I stopped sending my little flyer around, because I realized this was not the way. If you really do the work from inside and do it from a deep place, the outside meets you, is at the door meeting you, and that's how you explain in a way synchronicity. And so I stopped sending my flyer, trusting that if I was doing was the right thing for me to do, still making a step or two, it's not all sort of sitting waiting for, but still trusting. Things started to happen, and all the things that I do, like I go to universities, I don't send my resume around, and I'm so used to the suffering artist, who is trying to push mountains to have a resume or slides looked at and so forth, or an article written. And my experience has been very different, and that's why I'm kind of very happy to share that when I'm sent on the road, that it's a very joyful experience. It's true when you read, about the Black Madonna of Poland and Guadalupe, when you read their history, even though one is supposedly an apparition and the other is an icon, but they have tremendous similarities. They were both crowned queen of their countries. They were the savior, and that's quite amazing. Such different worlds. There are many similarities, and the mother of the oppressed, definitely. And you probably know that, I'm sure, in Poland, Solidarity people couldn't have anything indicating they were member of Solidarity, so they would wear a button of the Black Madonna of Poland. And in the exhibition there was a painting of the Black Madonna wearing a button of Lech Walesa, which was quite wonderful. I wish you could have, but possibly I could help you get a print of that. But so it shows, the connection. The Black Madonna sent me on many different kinds of adventures. One was in the exhibition I included 5 different kinds of works. I had work by traditional folk artists who are, it's a very alive tradition here in New Mexico. I had children's art. I had art by mainstream artists, from different states who are working with the Guadalupe, and then I had prisoners' art, and then finally I had reproductions of murals, because in some cities in the southwest there are a lot of Black Madonna murals, I mean Guadalupe murals. So I noticed that the prisoners' art is very, very traditional. Usually they draw on the handkerchief. You know, they don't have any materials, and it's quite a tradition. So I sent a group of drawings from a prison in San Antonio, Texas, I believe. But here there is a prison, and I was talking to the woman Holly Haas, who's created this incredible art program for the prisoners, and I was saying to her, how come, you know, they do this very traditional work? Well, it's true. Why many of them are either of Mexican background and you know, might be of sort of you know, simple backgrounds themselves, and so they are very much, you know, sort of, it's the mother. But I said to her, why don't I, maybe they have never seen anything else, and in my, you know, research over the years, I found some amazing work done by Latino, Chicanos, or, you know, very powerful work where the Madonna, in a way, kind of came out of her halo, so to speak, and then sometimes it was literal in the images that I found. So I went and spent a day at the prison and did a slide presentation to the prisoners. And it was really one of the wonderful and extraordinary adventures, you know, that I had through this connection with the Black Madonna. And they, you know, they were quite, some of them really reacted quite lively, you know. And I remember one of the prisoners was Black. He was from New Jersey, and he was so excited about that. We had this whole thing, and he asked me to make copies of some of the documents that I had there, and he was going to send them to his lawyer, who was a woman, a feminist, and he talked of ISIS, and it was just one of those wonderful moments, you know, where I felt, well, here, she's sending me here, that's what I need to do today. And there have been many instances like that, but that was really one of the special stories where through, you know, this mother figure, you know, I could really connect with these people and talk about extraordinary things, you know, talk about freedom. What is the meaning of freedom? I remember with one man, we had this one-on-one conversation, you know, and we got to quite a place, you know, because to me freedom is an inner state beyond, you know, the physical freedom. I mean, if you're not free inside, you're not going to be free anywhere. So these were the kinds of things that I was able to talk about with these men who were in prison. It was really wonderful. The river, that's another long story. You know, I mentioned discovering the Guadalupe meaning hidden river. There was a time at the beginning when I was reading different things, and at that time I was doing research on the symbolism of weaving, and I came across a book called Celtic Mysteries, and really, you know, found all these references to not only weaving, but to water and to the you know, springs where women would go and tie knots. And for a while I was wondering whether wave and weave didn't have a common root, you know. And I found actually some text that, and a poem by Gary Snyder that brought all of that together: women and wave and weave, and it goes on and on. But another interesting thing is that I remember this period where I read, everything I was reading was about water, it seemed, and I came across Hildegard from Bingen, the mystic from the 12th century, who talks a lot about water, that things are wet, not dry, and so forth. And I discovered shortly after that the day I started my great cleansing of the Rio Grande River was her birthday, September 17th. That was another synchronicity. But all through that time, I definitely, you know, felt that what I was doing, you know, was sort of like remembering you know, these things that we were doing naturally, going to the rivers and praying, or, you know, getting some water, which we used sacred. I mean, we used to call sacred, or we didn't even in those days need to add the word sacred. Everything was sacred, you know. So it felt that, in a way, very much from an inner place, not really being called to do this, not really having any explanation for it. It's just this same kind of energy that I felt when I saw the picture of the Black Madonna, you know, feeling you need to do this, you need to go after this, and not knowing. And I think it's taking me years to really understand the meaning and some of the lessons that the river taught me, because she became my teacher. And so in terms of feminine deities, I really feel that the river, who in a way is the eyes of the earth, I mean, water can be seen as the eyes of the earth, you know, the vision of the earth has been my teacher. And one of the things that I think the main lesson, which was really hard to put in words, and it took me even years to understand, and this sort of came around or about in '89, it was and this was the gift of having kept a journal, because when you kind of look back, you see, you know, you've written certain things, and then you see it's black and white, black on white, who you were then and who you are now. Because as, you know, water, you change, you know, that's one of the lessons. But the lesson was that, you know, all of this is not about doing, it's about being. And then the doing flows from the being. And this was a very hard kind of thing to comprehend, but I remember being invited to speak at a symposium here in town at the Center for Contemporary Art, organized with the Elmwood Institute, the Fritjof Capra's Institute, and they call themselves a think do tank. They're think do tankers, and I was asked to do a workshop on heroism in dangerous times. And I did that in collaboration with a wonderful woman here, Anne Valley Fox, who's a poet and an educator. And together we had done our homework about, you know, heroism a la Campbell, and we had reread, you know, Campbell's work and done our little script, and we're ready for our workshop. And 2 nights before the workshop, I had this terrible nightmare. And I usually don't have nightmares, and I sort of worked on it, and I thought, well, maybe it's because, you know, what I wrote yesterday is not who I am today. So, River, help, help. And this whole piece came out about, you know, this whole idea of it's about being and not doing. And this is what I shared with these think do tankers, and I was very nervous, and at the time I didn't even understand what I was trying to say, but years later, of course, it has sunk in. And I saw that at the beginning of my writing, even though I wasn't really, you know, an activist per se, but still there was a little tint of that, thinking that my action was going to change something and somebody. And what I learned is that you do what you do because you are called from your deepest place. You do it because it's your love. You do it for love, and whether it changes anybody, that's fine. But you really do it because you want to do it from the depth of your being. And interestingly enough, someone is asking me to write this piece for a book on artists involved with nature, with the earth, and so it's sort of what I learned from the river, and this comes up eventually. And the man called me the other night saying, well, I really would like you to say something about how art done the way, you know, this current in art right now, this environmental art, is really transforming consciousness. And I said, well, you know, I'll consider it, but this is kind of against what I'm saying. So I was looking at my text on my computer, and the phone rings, and this man, who I don't know, says, who is involved in planning an Earth Day celebration this year in Santa Fe, says, I heard you were doing this work in the river. You know, and this was my answer to him, saying, you know, I have done my work without sort of waving a banner about it, and it has a life of its own, and it has an energy of its own. So I wrote back to Billy Oakes, the man who was asking me that question. I said, well, this is what happened. You know, I was willing to consider it, although I told you that I didn't feel I could say that because it's contrary to my philosophy. But the phone rang and this is what happened, so it was a funny story. But this is, definitely the Revered Earth has been my teacher, and I feel that, today, I have been very much involved with this current in art of artists, working with the earth or the water, or in many different ways. And I feel, to me, that's really important. And it's not going to be another ism that's going down the drain in 6 months, or a year or two, as many art movements have had, such a short life. It's really important, and so I think that right now, that's why actually it's being known. There are shows. For the Smithsonian Institute is traveling a show, Fragile Ecologies. There are many shows that are happening now, and books that are being written about artists who are involved with the earth in some way. And I think that's really important because, we need to reconnect, and the old religions don't seem to be doing it, and we're sort of creating our own way of reconnecting. So I think that's really important. Yes, the Black Madonna and sexuality. Well, definitely, in a way, I'm thankful that Kali came into my life, because I can see that during the years that I was really solely involved with the Black Madonna, I was very much, sort of away from expressing myself more, in this fuller way. And I think Kali was instrumental in helping me with that. And actually, when you study her story and the symbolism, she's, the mother of Tantra, which is a spirituality that's very much involving the sacredness of sexuality. And so through that, I was very thankful, because I feel I learned a lot. The story of the heart, that's what this story is. And personally, it's been really very important for me, and I think that definitely I've been helped by, my encounters through the years, and to the point that, I often, when I go to universities as visiting artist and I talk to students, I feel I'm sent there to kind of share a whole different story, and what I tell them is to really listen, and to listen, to that inner voice, to that dark place. And I talk of that, and I actually, in my meditation, I often, this dark feminine energy becomes, in a way, a cave. And like the heart is a cave, and I sort of nestle in there as a child. And first it's scary, but over the years I've trusted that. And so the heart definitely has become my main thing, to the point that, because my path as an artist has flowed from my spirit, and to me heart and spirit are definitely one. I have had to surrender to this thing that was coming out, and I was fighting for a while, but I felt the term artist didn't really reflect who I was. And because, first of all, artist is too divisive. You are up here and other people are down there, and we're all one, we're all the same. And so when you are walking on the path of the heart, you are all one. And so art and earth and heart are also connected, plus ear is in that, EAR. So on my calling card since last year, I finally surrendered to the Heartist, which is a term that I've been using, and I'm on my way to sharing. I'm on my way to North Carolina to do a big project with environmentalists. I'm going there to share the message that we're all Heartists, we're all working for the earth. our society has decided to call certain people a certain way and other people a certain way, but I feel we need to all realize that we're one and we're in our own way. We're all doing work or art, because work is art, life is art for the earth, and we're all artists, and that's what I feel that all these divinities, feminine divinities, have been my guides, and I'm just sort of an instrument. It's not my term. I'm delighted it's on my calling card, and I have people give me the definition, and it's them, and I'm not. And so I think definitely the heart is is the key. And what they all these different deities show us is that the heart is multifaceted, just like people are multifaceted, the earth is multifaceted, and it's a constant journey, discovery. It's a path, and the path is by walking. I mentioned one where Kali came, in her beheaded form, and but the other one that I referred to, which I believe is the only dream that's in a way connected to this story, it wasn't an image of the Black Madonna, but it was a loom with threads hanging, and on the end of threads there were little clay figures. And it was a very powerful, intriguing image, and I understood it when I read about the Valkyries. The Valkyries are also more part of the Kali part, and the Valkyries were known to, if men were not, the men were not following this path, they would, well, I forgot the detail of the story, but they would end up killed, and they would use their the threads of the loom were made of their guts, and their heads would be hanging at the bottom. And so when I read that, this was exactly my dream. And in that performance, lecture, installation, I relived my dream, and it was a ritual, of course, because and I went to the river and dug some clay and made some figures of certain energies that I wanted to cut from my life. And I had the Valkyrie music, and I had the amazing, and I did that right in front of this audience, at the Banff School of Fine Arts, and it was very empowering for me. It was very, it took me a while to kind of understood even what I had done, but it was very powerful. And it's the only dream that I feel, besides the Kali dream, that I feel was strong enough. I've had little dreams here and there, but about a dark figure, but this one, actually more recently, I had one which, it's sort of a different energy. I had one, it was an island on the sea, and the island was sort of like lip shape, like, mouth shape. And there was this naked black woman, very beautiful and voluptuous, who would go into the water, and she would come out, and she would go back into the water, and she would come out. And it was a very much like a Venus energy, a dark Venus energy, like, I'm beautiful, I am who I am, and I'm alive, and I'm breathing, and you're breathing. And it was an invitation to, I think, another level of beingness, because, as I said, we're all different facets, and the journey is discovering, all the different parts that we are, and not being afraid, even though we haven't been told that they were good or respectable or anything like that. So that was a beautiful, yes, I should say, this was a more recent dream. Yeah. Her message is really, to me, comes back to the heart. I feel the heart, or love, whatever you call that energy, is the way that we're going to turn things around. And I see that, being an artist involved also in activism and so forth, I see that activism is changing. It's no longer down the imperialist or down this, the activism is becoming much more positive. There's always a way to connect, to stress a positive thing, and then you express your need or your grief or your need for change. But it all comes from that place of heart, of respect, and really listening to the other side, which we haven't been able to do very much in our world. And I think that listening is a key, because if you just look at, I think the Black Madonna image, she's veiled and she's pensive, and that she's listening. She's the best listener in the world. Her whole image exudes that. And I feel that's really listening with an open heart. I think that's what she represents. Listening, she's there, and she's really there, and she's kind of veiled because until now, she, what has been happening has not been very much what her message, what her energy is about. So she's kind of staying a little hidden. But I think as more and more people are going to be listening with an open heart, she's going to come out more and more. And I think we're seeing that. We're hearing more and more apparitions, and we're hearing of more and more dreams, and so much energy about her. And I think that shows that she's going to take down her veil. That Isis, the famous dictum of Isis, I forgot it right now, but it's about a veil, and I feel we're getting closer when she's going to uncover her veil, when she knows that we're willing to listen to each other and forgive each other and love each other.